At 3:03 a.m., my doorbell chimed for the second time. The man on my porch didn't move. He hadn't moved since yesterday. The Ring app vibrated against my palm and froze on the same frame I'd stared at for hours. A hood, a jawline shadow, a rain-dark coat soaking without complaint. His head was angled toward the peephole like he could listen through it. When I scrubbed back 12 hours, the sun crawled across him and he didn't flinch. When kids biked by after school, he didn't turn. When the sprinklers misted the steps, he didn't wipe his face. He rang once at 3:03 a.m. yesterday and raised his hand halfway, then left it there, a promise that never landed. "Who are you?" I whispered at the glass of my phone, because the speaker felt safer than wood. The live button pulsed. I tapped it. The porch came alive with the wet hiss of the street. My own voice, bored and sleep-hoarse, bled through the tiny speaker by the door. "Can I help you?" A long breath across the mic. Not my breath. A thin rasp of coat fabric. Then a man's voice, quiet, as if not to wake someone in the house. I came back. Every hair on my arms prickled. I hadn't expected words. Yesterday there had been nothing. No answer, no movement. Just a human figure refusing to leave. "Back from what?" I asked. My throat wanted to cough and didn't. Silence pressed. A minute grounded itself and refused to pass. The porch light hummed in the feed. Distant tires hissed. Inside my kitchen, the refrigerator cut off and the house felt like it swallowed a mouthful of water and held it. The voice said, "You didn't open." I got it then, the shape of the guilt I'd been circling since noon. Yesterday morning I left for work late, head down, coffee spitting out of a cracked lid. A man at the end of the block had lifted his hand like he was flagging a cab. I had looked busy in the way people do when they are afraid to be asked for something they can't afford to give. I stepped into my car and drove away while he watched the space where I had been. The coat looked familiar now, the angle of the shoulders. I didn't see you." I lied. "You did," he said. I moved to the door and put my eye to the peephole. The glass was a fisheye smear. The hood was a dark bowl. He stood close enough I could see the pulse in his throat or imagine one. He leaned a fraction toward the lens. The peephole widened his cheek into a pale moon. No eyes. Just the idea of eyes set in a suggestion of a face that my brain kept trying to complete and couldn't. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, one digit off from my own. "Replay is on," it said. "Don't step outside." "Who are you?" I asked again, a little louder. "If you need help, we can call someone." The doorbell chimed a third time. Two soft notes that always sounded like a question I didn't want to answer. He hadn't lifted his finger. The chime sounded again, closer now, not from the speaker but from the wood itself. A sympathetic ring as if the house had learned it by heart. My neighbor Tasha's porch light across the street clicked on. Her shadow moved behind the screen. A text from her appeared. "Is that the same guy? He's been there all day, right? You okay?" I typed, "I don't know who he is. Calling 911. She wrote, "Don't open. I'm recording from my window. The police took 30 minutes yesterday and he was just gone." The word sat like a cold stone in my mouth. Gone implied he'd left. He hadn't left. He'd been there. When the patrol car rolled past at dusk, he wasn't on their dashcam. But on my phone, in my window, in my bones, he had never taken a step. "Sir," I said through the intercom, because pretending to be formal helped. "I'm going to ask you to leave my property." He didn't answer. Something scraped softly just below the peephole, like a nail testing paint. A new notification slid over my screen. Motion detected. 3:03 a.m. clip ready to view. The thumbnail was the same frame it had sent me 24 hours ago. The same raised hand, the same bowed head, the same glistening hoodie. The time in the corner burned 3:03 like a superstition. I watched it anyway. The clip began with an empty porch. The lens breathed, refocused, and the man arrived between frames. No approach, no feet on the steps, just there. His hand lifted and stopped. The chime sounded. The audio picked up a wet exhale and a soft, almost embarrassed laugh. "Mine." "Hello," I said, not into the clip but into the living air. "Why did you come back?" The speaker crackled. Because you did, the man said, and the words were so wrong they fit. I scrolled back further than the app wanted me to go, digging my nail against the timeline. To fought, then gave, then snapped to yesterday's dawn. He was there. To midnight. There. The afternoon. There. Noon. There. He never shifted weight. And yet, at 9:17 p.m., when a moth smacked the lens, the coat's fabric fluttered like wind had discovered it. I cracked the deadbolt. Tiny. A breath. The metal tongue felt like it had weight. A warning I couldn't unpack crawled its fingers through my ribs. Don't, Tasha texted in all caps. My phone tried to buzz a second text and failed. The signal cut to 1 bar and then none. The live feed popped and fell back to a frozen image I couldn't tell was past or present. The porch camera's IR threw the world into grayscale. The pupil of the peephole blackened. He'll leave. I told the space I'd been protecting since yesterday. If I wait long enough, he'll get cold and he'll leave. He doesn't get cold, a voice said behind me. Not at the door, not in my speaker, but inches from my ear. I turned so hard the house tilted. The living room was empty except for familiar shapes and the low digital breath of appliances. The voice had been thin enough to be a wire. My jaw vibrated with aftersound like I'd heard it through bone. I lifted the chain. The brass clacked. The door eased a finger's width. Rain-ghosted air touched my cheek. I smelled wet cedar from the planter box and something else, metallic and damp, like coins warmed in a palm. Why won't you look at me? He asked from the other side, words too near the wood. I stared through the gap. The visible slice of him was a column of black fabric and a triangle of jaw that could have been mine if I forgot my own face and built it again in a hurry. The porch light above him hummed. A trapped wasp. My phone buzzed so violently I almost dropped it. A text from my number this time. An attached video. Title. Replay_0303.mp4. I pressed my thumb. The video opened to my own front hallway. My own breath in the mic. My own hand on the deadbolt. In the video I pulled the door wide. The camera drifted like it floated at shoulder height. A figure moved past the lens into me, into my camera self, casual as a friend coming in from the rain. The clip ended on my floor, pointed at my open door. The porch empty. The street humming. A man-shaped absence where the camera insisted a man had been. Open. The voice at the wood said, nearly kind now. You did yesterday. You can do it again. I put my palm flat to the wood and felt a second palm match it from the other side. Heat through paint. Fingerprints I couldn't name pressing mine into a thin agreement neither of us had written. The house clicked somewhere deep, like something important memorizing me. On the other side, the matching palm slid down the wood, dragging heat, and the door side a deeper inch. The lock tongue hovered between out and in, as if tasting. I swallowed and the sound bounced back at me from the peephole, a tiny shell of breath inside metal. You know me, he said. Just open. I almost said a name I didn't have. The house ticked again. Another piece of it filing me under a heading I didn't want to read. Behind me, the refrigerator compressor coughed to life and made the quiet look smaller. The chain lifted itself another link as the building settled. I didn't touch it. It wasn't enough to stop anything. He'll leave, I whispered, a bargain to no one. He doesn't leave, the voice behind my ear said again, and I felt the consonants tremble the hairs of my neck. I shoved the door. The gap became a slice I could look through with both eyes. Rain breathed. Street hum rose and combed my skin. The figure leaned, not forward but inward, like a song slipping into a room you hadn't invited to fill. My phone buzzed once more and died to black. The live tile grayed. The timestamp on the last frame settled on 3:03 and held like a held note. Yesterday, he said. You opened right now. I didn't, I said. But the clip I'd watched, the shoulder-height camera drifting as someone moved past it, had been my house. My hand. The door I loved because I chose its color to be a little braver than I was. Please, I said, to him or to me. Please, he repeated, same shape, thinner, like an old recording. The chain slid off the catch with an unseemly eagerness. The door rolled a thumb's width more, and air that hadn't been invited in months pressed its forehead to mine. The smell beyond the cedar planter wasn't weather. It was cold metal warmed by a hand. It was wool trapped too long in a damp place. It was the breath of a person who had learned your cadence and now spoke through it. I came back, he said. You do too. I was moving before I made the choice. My palm flattened. My shoulder met wood, and my weight leaned into the world. The gap widened. My driveway waited without opinion. The figure's hood turned a degree toward me. Something like relief moved through the fabric, not as motion but as the idea of motion realized and filed. A soft shove returned along the surface of the door. Not pushback. Entrance. The air thickened, and something crosshatched the pressure of me, like two films laid almost on top of each other trying to be the same reality. The sensation started at my sternum, a careful, deliberate matching of the length of my breath to a longer, patient breath that had been waiting for mine. Don't, I told my body, and my body, faithful, failed me. The world blinked. I was on the porch, rain on my cheek, the door against my palm, cool paint, familiar. The crack in the varnish at the middle hinge. The porch light's hum locating itself in one ear. Inside my hall someone stood with their back to me, my coat still on, my hand still pressed to my side of the wood, as if the mirror had assumed mass and left me. I shoved the door. It didn't open. The deadbolt snicked home from the inside, a sound I could pick out in a riot. The chain lifted and caught. A second later, the lights in the hall came up, and my voice from inside. My voice with the grit rubbed off, called gently, like I was embarrassing myself. Can I help you? I bent to peer through the peephole and saw my own cheek widen into a pale moon. I couldn't see my eyes. The perspective put the lens where the iris would be. Behind that lentil of fish-eyed skin, my house breathed as if it had been sleeping until right now. I lifted my hand on instinct to knock, the same dumb wave my body gives behind glass when anything moves. The bell chimed 3:03. The note hung too long. My phone woke with a corpse's sudden happiness. The screen showed the porch feed. A man at my door in a rain-dark hood, head angled toward the peephole. A text from an unknown number 1 digit off from mine blinked over the image. Replay is on. Don't step outside. I was outside. Tasha, I called, turning my head slow because some new logic in me rationed motion. Her porch light across the street was on. Her shadow moved, but my voice hit glass and came back alone. A text from her arrived anyway. He's gone. Where did he go? You okay? I typed with hands that felt a second slower than the rest of me. I'm on the porch. I watched the bubbles appear. Then she wrote, porch is empty. I can see your hall light. You moving around. Wave at me if you're good. In my hall, through the beveled pane, my shape shifted. A man inside my house stepped to the entry table and set keys down with a clink. He looked up toward the camera as if listening to directions through the ceiling. He lifted his hand and waved at Tasha across the street. My exact neighborly wave, practiced and inoffensive. I didn't mean, I said to the door and put my forehead to the wood. Heat answered from the other side. My own forehead leaned there. Our breaths fogged paint. Two prints met and failed to agree on whose heat belonged where. The speaker popped. My inside voice spoke through it at me like I was a solicitor who needed gentle managing. It's late, he said, kindness sharpened by patience. You can come back tomorrow. I am tomorrow, I said, stupid with the size of the sentence. The peephole darkened. An eye on the other side met the lens and filled it. I saw no pupil, just the lens itself staring back. My camera in my camera. The world trembled around that one black dot. A vibration deep in the wood ran down into the frame and into the steps, like the house was a harp and someone had plucked a string all the way down. The chime fluttered without ringing. Inside, my other self moved with the rhythm of a person who knew where the soft step was and which hinge squeaked and how much pressure the latch needed. He turned off the porch light to kill my face. The IR from the ring flooded the scene, and the world went farther from color. My phone threw a new video into my palm. Unasked. Title. Replay_0303_tomorrow.mp4. The thumbnail was my door from inside. Empty. The timestamp below it was tomorrow's date at 3:03 a.m. The little bar under the thumbnail crept right on its own. Obliging. I let it open. The footage began with the door already closed. A breath, mine fuller than it needed to be. A hand, my hand, reached and reset the chain with the fondness of ritual. I heard a second me laugh, tiny and relieved. Then the bell chimed, and in the corner of the frame the peephole swelled black like an eye waking. From the speaker, my voice, shaken to a line I recognized, said, "Can I help you?" The camera didn't look at the person on the porch. It looked at me turning away. It watched me cross the hall and set my phone on the table with the camera pointed wrong. It watched me go to the kitchen and pour a glass of water and steady my hand with my other hand and drink like I just held my breath for a year. Somewhere under all that, the bell chimed again. Somewhere I stood without moving at all. The video ended with a long recording of my door being a door. The timestamp said 3:11, 3:19, 3:48. Dawn bent the dark, and the screen gently dimmed to protect my battery. It did not once show the porch. Open? My voice at the wood whispered, not mine now, but the echo of what I would say the next time I was me. I tried to step back from the door and couldn't. Not because anything held me, but because something had been asked of my body and it was answering, stand here and be a one-frame question. The coat I hadn't put on found my shoulders. The air at 3:03 belonged to it. The house had memorized that breath too and fed it back to me to wear. Across the street, Tasha texted again. Police on the way. Don't be mad. Someone should check on you. Inside, my other self lifted my phone, thumbed the lock code without looking, typed quickly. False alarm. Sorry. Long day. Went back to bed. Her typing stopped. Okay. Glad you're fine. Wave so I know. He went to the front window and waved. I watched him do it. I watched her wave back. The exchange hopped neighbor to neighbor like good news. I pressed the doorbell just to be a noise in the life that had decided it no longer needed me. The chime sounded inside and inside me. The step under my foot held me kindly, like a nurse who knows you by first name and will not admit it. A car rolled by at the end of the block. The wash of its lights never touched me. The rain quit with no ceremony. The night did that slow roll toward thin blue that breaks men in custody and porch statues in half. My joints made no case for relief. Why me? I asked the wood, because wood in a house is the thing you ask when no one else will answer. From the other side, my voice, quieter, said, because you looked. The peephole lens cooled. Somewhere in the house, a drawer closed with the care that means you own what's inside it. My breath turned the same size as the gap under the door. I thought of the man at the end of the block yesterday morning. Small lift of the hand. My busy eyes folding around him like light refusing to scatter. I didn't move when the sun finished dressing the street. I didn't move when Tasha's dog barked and stopped. I didn't move when my inside self made coffee, when he fixed the crooked frame, when he hummed a song I hum only when I forget I'm doing it. Every now and then his head canted toward the door with polite unease, like a host hearing a guest who hasn't left. The phone in my hand vibrated with one last message from the number one digit off from mine. A single line, hold still. I watched the text dissolve on the glass as if it had been written on breath. The screen went black and showed me, dimly, a man at his own door, unable to leave or enter, a shape in a coat that had learned him. Inside, the bell chimed once, not because anyone pressed it, but because the house remembered the note and wanted it. Somewhere in the hallway, my other self smiled at no one, put on my shoes and picked up my keys. At 3:03 a.m., the doorbell chimed for the fourth time. I didn't lift my hand on purpose. It lifted anyway, and the porch, the house, and the camera all agreed it had always been there.